Hello everyone, welcome to this week's video preview of the Michigan football game. This weekend the Wolverines host Illinois at noon on Saturday. I'm Pete Bigelow here with my colleague from AnnArbor.com, Michael Rothstein. Wolverines enter the game on a 3-game Big Ten losing streak. We'll start out, Mike, do you think that's going to change this weekend?
Not if they're not playing Indiana, it's not. Indiana is the only Big Ten team they've beaten in the past 2 years, and they have shown no signs of being able to play good enough defense or good enough on special teams to win a Big Ten football game right now. That's just the fact. They're giving up the most fourth down conversions in the NCAA right now. Their third down conversion rate is terrible. Their defense can't really stop anybody unless Rich Rodriguez lights a fire under their butt like he did in the fourth quarter against Penn State. But how many times, how many weeks in a row does that? Can he go to that well before it just doesn't work anymore? That's just part of a coaching axiom, I think. And right now, you look at this team and they're not playing well enough to win a football game. They're just not. And most of that's on defense. Their offense is still playing pretty well. That said, what changes maybe can they make, Pete, that can make them serviceable?
Well, I think they've made the personnel changes they're going to make. They've moved Cam Gordon to hybrid linebacker. They've inserted Ray Vinipal in the lineup. And I don't think there's much more personnel-wise they can do. But what I think they can do is I think Rich needs to again tell his team that it's time to stop playing tentative. And I think that's been a theme that he's hit on every week, that these are young guys who are kind of afraid to make a mistake. And I think he just needs to tell these guys, hey, go out there and let it rip because, quite frankly, they can't be a whole lot worse than what they've already shown. So I think it's time for him to just say, go play aggressive football. Forget about what mistakes you might make. Don't worry about it. Just go out and play hard. I think maybe a message like that maybe could free up some of these kids to be a little more assertive and aggressive on the football field. And again, I tend to agree with you that there's not much more that they can do to fix things right now, but I think they need to play a little bit looser, and that would be a message that Rich could hit on.
Yeah, but in theory, couldn't they have had that message 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? The one thing that's always struck to me, at least in the past couple of weeks, is hearing how it's not going to be like last year, and that they don't like to look back in the past. Well, there's always the thought that if you don't look back in the past, you're bound to repeat your mistakes. So, and if you look at the season right now, that's exactly what's happening.
I agree with you, but I think maybe something like that 3 weeks ago would have worked just as well. Where every week we hear about how these kids are playing a little tentative and not aggressive enough. And I think if Rich would just tell them, like, don't worry about it, just go out there and play hard. Don't worry about the mistakes. Don't play tentative. At least from my perspective, I would rather see them lose a game by playing too aggressive instead of not aggressive enough.
Well, I would agree with you there, except there is the one point that Rich brings up that, so if you play the corners and press coverage, every time they've done that, they've gotten burned too. So it's not really like when they do play aggressive, it's worked well so far.
I think they've played with a lack of aggression more so than they've played hard at times. I don't think they've blitzed enough this season.
I would agree with you there. I don't think they have either. I think part of that is due to running a 3-man front. I think part of that, when they have done that, they've run more 4-man fronts recently. I think part of that is that I just don't think the linebacking core is good enough to do that against certain Big Ten offensive lines, especially if they couldn't do it against a Penn State offensive line that was decimated worse than the Michigan secondary. So, at what point you just wonder if it's just not going to work. No matter what they do, it's just not going to work. And maybe that's a pessimist viewpoint, but right now I think that's the reality. Anyway, Pete, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, Mike, you're the one who's called me quite a few times this week the optimist of the group here, which is strange considering you're the one who picked Michigan to beat Penn State last week. Still, I think there's a lot of factors going to this game that favor the Wolverines. Namely, this might be the last home game of the season that they have a legitimate chance of winning. I think that they match up well with Illinois in some ways, although Illinois' defense is really perhaps one of the most physical that Michigan will face all season. That said, I think I'm going to pick Michigan in the upset, going with a gut feeling. I like the Wolverines 27-24 at home.
Well, Pete, I think it's time for me to wear the black hat again. Yeah, I picked Michigan to upset Penn State last week, and I was wrong. Don't think I'm going to be wrong this week, though. Illinois' offense, led by a guy who plays a little bit like Denard Robinson, Nathan Shielhays. They have a tough running back in Michaela Short, who Michigan hasn't shown they can stop tough, bruising running backs yet this year. And a very good Illinois defense is going to beat Michigan soundly. Illinois 35, Michigan 21.